Good afternoon, and I hope you are ready for this session, also because maybe we need your participation. We will talk about citizen and city, then it's important and also really how can I say, pressure, there is a lot of pressure on this question, how we can involve citizens. We used to talk a lot about it, but today you will see three different experiences, one from Lebanon, one from Turkey, and the other one from Ghana, to see how in these three different situations, these three persons try to involve citizens in the planning and the intervention on the city. And inside of this conference in which we talked about sustainable, we use this word giving to it a lot of meaning, but in reality it's not clear at the end which is the real meaning of sustainable. Personally, as a landscape architect that try to interpret, to create a better quality of life, not only in the rural, but in every territory, I think that when we talk about sustainable, first of all, we talk about citizen. And then how important is the role that citizens play on constructing every small piece of land, and how they contribute to the sustainability of the city. Then I don't want to talk a lot. I want to give possibility to these three interesting person to show to you their experience. Then we will start with Muhammad Ayoub, that is co-founder of an NGO, NAHNOO, that was established to advocate for public space in Lebanon. Maybe some of you already know some of the campaign in which he was involved or he pushed, as for example the one for Arsh Beirut. And we will continue with Merve, and then at the end with Victoria. Okay, then please.
Thank you, Maria. It's good like this, or I have to do it like this? The voice is clear. Okay, so how are you? I would love to thank at the beginning Issam Fars Institute for receiving us, and also Friedrich-Ebert. هحكي بالعربي. So هلا أنا بخلط عادة لغتي عربي إنجليزي مع بعضها، بس إنه نشوف شو بيطلع. أول شغلة بدي أقول إنه شو شايفين هون. What do you see in this picture? Do you know what's this picture exactly? What? دور عليه إزاز. Why? ليش على إزاز؟ Okay. Okay. So هيدا هو صحيح حيط على إزاز، ولكن جوا في سبيس، والسبيس هي قد هيدي الغرفة، والسبيس فاضي ما فيها شيء انسرق. ولكن وهيدي الصورة هي بعين الرمانة، منطقة شعبية، وطبعا فيها كتير من الشباب والأطفال. وفي حدا عنده هيدي السبيس اللي حط فيها هيدا الحيط مع إزاز. يعني وليش بده يحط هيدا الإزاز لو ما في الناس بدها تفوت على سبيس فاضي؟ يعني ما في شيء، لكن ليمنع الناس من أن تستخدم هيدا السبيس. هيدي الصورة كتير مهمة ومعبرة، لأنها بتدل على شغلتين. الشغلة الأولى حاجة الأطفال وحاجة الشباب للمساحات العامة، للمساحة شو ما كان نوع هيدي المساحة. وبتدل الشيء الثاني إنه ما عندهم هيدي المساحة، لدرجة إذا حدا عنده سبيس مثل هالغرفة بيحط حيط وإزاز حتى أي حدا يكون عم بيحاول يوصل لمساحة فاضية يتأذى. انه طبعا بالمساحات الفاضيه واحد يمكن يعمل ملعب فوتبول، يمكن يعمل بيحطوا اشياء مثل ما كنا نعمل نحن وصغار، نحط عارضات لنلعب فوتبول او نحط شطاره نلعب باسكت او غيره او اي شيء ممكن الاطفال يستخدموها او الشباب. وبالتالي كرمال هيدا الشخص ما بده حدا يفوت على ارضه عمل هيدا الشيء. ولكن هيدا ايضا بدل على تقصير، اذا اول شيء حاجه الناس للمساحات العامه للبابليك سبيس، وايضا تقصير من قبل السلطه مش الدوله، لانه دائما بقولوا الدوله ما بنعرف على مين نحط الحق. تقصير السلطه، واولا البلديه، وطبعا ثانيا المحافظ والحكومه ب to provide يعني او يكون يعملوا مساحات عامه تلبي حاجات هيدي الاطفال والناس. ولكن هيدا شخص عنده ارض، اما السلطه فكيف بتتصرف اذا عندها مساحه؟ طبعا قبل ما اقول السلطه كيف تتصرف نقول انه ولكن هيدا الحيط كمان بطل موجود، يعني ما شايفين هلا اسود كله، بمعنى بطل موجود هيدي المساحه لانه اصلا ببيروت ما عادش في مساحات ابدا حتى خاصه، كلها صارت بنايات. المساحات العامه بعدها لهلا يعني كيف بتتصرف السلطه معها؟ هيدا البحر احنا بنعرف ببيروت بعد في منطقتين، الديلي ورملة البيضاء، من المنطقتين الوحيدين اللي بعد الإنسان بيقدر يوصل من خلالهم على البحر. مثل ما شايفين مؤخرا على الديلي حطوا هيدا السياج، وهيدا مش شبك عادي، هيدا عادة بحطوه وقت يكون في شيء عسكري حدود، وبالتالي تشوفوا كيف تتعاطى البلدية والمحافظ مع الناس، يعني وكأنه منطقة عسكرية. المساحة العامة صارت منطقة عسكرية ممنوع الدخول لها، واكثر من هيك ممنوع التصوير فيها، يعني بتعرفوا الداون تاون ممنوع نصور فيها، حرش بيروت ممنوع تصوروا فيها الى اخره. فاذا مثل ما شايفين السياج، وايضا رملة البيضاء اللي مؤخرا كمان الشاطئ الشعبي الوحيد تاريخيا كمان طلب انه يتسيج. وهيدا البارك الوحيد حرش بيروت، البارك الوحيد الموجود ببيروت، الجنينة المنتزه عفوا، ما في غيره. مثل ما شايفين كيف كمان سياج واسلاك شائكة، وكمان البوابة مسكرة. وهيدي العبارة لفتتني كتير أول ما بلشنا الحملة، وقتها بقولوا مكتوب عليها ممنوع يفوت أي حدا ما عنده ترخيص permission. بس مش بس ممنوع يفوتوا الناس، كمان ممنوع يفوت الكلاب. يعني وكأن السلطة بطريقة قاصدة أو غير قاصدة تساوي بين المواطن والكلاب. طبعا وهيدا كله المواطن ما قام وعمل انتفاضة أو كيف بتعملوا هيك. طبعا لأنه الأجنبي أيضا بفوت، بس مش حيلا أجنبي، إذا كان من غانا ما في يفوت، بس إذا كان أشقر في يفوت، بده يكون مبين عليه من أوروبا، لأنه كمان في هيدي النظرة إنه والله كلاس بكونوا أكتر. وطبعا هيدي نظرة دونية للذات. ولأقول إنه طبعا الناس ليه ما عم تتحرك، لأنه أيضا نحن بنعرف إنه وقت السلطة أو وقت البي بالبيت أو الأم يكونوا عم المسج اللي بوصلوها لأولادهم هي كتير بتأثر بنظرة الأولاد لحالهم. وقت السلطة بالبلد تكون نظرتها سلبية للمواطن اللي عايش، فحتما هيدا حيأثر عليه وعلى ثقته بنفسه وعلى نظرته لحاله. كرمال هيك نجحت السلطة عبر كل أساليبها وإعلامها بأنها تزرع فكرة لعند المواطن إنه أنت ما بتستاهل شيء، لدرجة مين ما بتسأل تعالوا نفتح جنينة عامة للناس ما بيقولوا كلهم ما الناس ما بتستاهل، يعني اللحام والتاكسي ما الناس ما بتستاهل، ما بيلبق لهم شيء، ما إلى آخره. وبعدين بنقوا ما عم يعطونا شيء، بيرجعوا بيقولوا ما بيلبق لنا شيء. فهيدا التناقض بالحكي. ففي نجاح بانه نوصل نحن ما بيطلع من امرنا شيء وما بيسوى لنا شيء، وبالتالي هيدا بيساعد السلطه دائما بالسطو على الملك العام والمال العام، ويقيموا فيها مشاريع خاصه لهم. هيدي بيروت مثل ما شايفين هول هيدا الحرش. اول حمله نحن كجمعيه وقت قررنا، نحن ما جايين من urban planning يعني باك جراوند، ما كنا دارسين هندسه، نحن اكثر دارسين علوم انسانيه، كان الهدف تبعنا هو الانسان. وقت نحكي عن بيروت عم نحكي كنا انه هيدا الانسان اللي عايش بيروت منه عايش ببيئه صحيه، وفي انقسام، بمعنى في اول مشكله اجتماعيه طائفيه، عايشين بايسوليتد نيبرهود، يعني كل كل طائفة لحالها، وفعلا حقيقة ما بيعرفوا بعض، حقيقة في أفكار مسبقة، حقيقة في رفض للآخر، في عداوات وإيمج وهمية مش موجودة فعلا. قلنا ضروري مثل ما الصالون بالبيت بيجمع العائلة، صالون المدينة ضروري يكون في صالون للمدينة، واللي هو المساحات العامة، اللي هي عم نحكي نحن عن سكويرز، عم نحكي عن البحر، عم نحكي عن النقل المشترك، عم نحكي عن الجنينات. ولكن نقينا هيدا حرش بيروت كجنينة بعد ما تعرف. كنا نحن حتى ما بنعرف انه في بارك ببيروت. الغريب انه هيدا في بارك ببيروت بمساحة 350 ألف متر مربع. كان هيدا يسموه حرش العيد أو بارك العيد، ويحتفلوا فيه كل الأهالي مع الأطفال كل الأعياد. بعد 22 سنة إغلاق، كل الجيل الجديد ما بيعرف شيء عنه لهيدا الحرش، فنجحوا كمان بحجة صيانته، نجحوا بأنه ينسوه للعالم. وطبعا في مشاريع كانت عليه بدها تصير، بلا ما يضلوا بارك كان في مشاريع ينقلوا الملعب البلدي ليعملوه على هيدا الحرش، وبالتالي بتروح آخر مساحة خضراء عامة ببيروت. فنحن وقت اخترنا هيدا الحرش لقينا هالمساحة الخضراء وقتها بسيرش على جوجل وين في مساحات خضراء، وبعدين وقت عملنا سيرش عنه لهيدا المساحة عرفنا انه هو مساحة عامة، هي حق عام، وهي يعني ملك الناس. وطبعا الاغلاق هو غير قانوني. وقت يكون عندك بارك ممنوع تسكره، انت بتسكر طريق مؤقتا لتعمل له صيانة، بس ما فيك تسكره طول العمر يعني. فاكتشفنا انه هو ملك عام، واهميته كان بالنسبه لنا انه هو بوسط المدينه، مثل ما شايفين هون بوسط المدينه بين كل الطوائف، وبالتالي بيقدر يعمل جسر حتى طبقات الاجتماعيه من حيث الوضع الاقتصادي. وبالتالي كان في يكون بريدج او مكان بنوصل الناس ببعضها. فقررنا نشتغل كرمال هيدا البارك. فعملنا دراسات طبعا قانونيه وغيرها. كانت حجج البلديه انه نحن، وطبعا كانوا يستعمل، بس لاقول هن بهمهم يستعملوه كحدود بين الطوائف، لانه ما بهمهم الناس تجتمع. فنحن قلنا جينا درسنا الوضع تبعه، مثل ما قلت انه هو ملك عام وتسكيره غير قانوني. واجهنا البلديه، كانت البلديه مثل العاده بتحكي مع الناس، ما الناس بكبوا بيوسخوا بيحرقوا ما بعرف شو الى اخره. وبالتالي أول شيء ما أخذتنا بشكل جدي، ولكن بعد العديد من التحركات قدام البلدية قدرنا نجبر البلدية على الأقل تعترف إنه هو ملك عام، بالوقت اللي كانت تقول هيدا ملك خاص وفيني أعمل بدي إياه. فقالت إنه هي ملك عام، ونجحنا بإنه يجي معنا رئيس البلدية يتفضل يحضر اجتماع نقاش عام مدينة، تاون هول ميتينجز، ويصير في نقاش بموضوع لأول مرة بيصير في بالمدينة ببيروت نقاش عام مع بلدية بيروت. وبالتالي صار في نقاش إنه ليش الحرش مسكر وضرورة فتح الحرش. وهون أبرز جملة بقولها وقت رئيس البلدية إنه بده حيفتحوا للعالم بس بفترة تجريبية، بده يجربهم للعالم. وطبعا هون الناس كان في صريخ موجودة أونلاين النقاش، كان في صريخ من العالم بيقولوا أنت اللي بتتجرب مش الناس اللي بتتجرب. وبالتالي انت رئيس البلديه اللي جايين نجربك، منك اعلى من الناس، بدك تتعاطى مع الناس بفوقيه معينه. انتهى النقاش بوعد رئيس بلديه بيروت بفتح الحرش، وكان هيدا اول نجاحات طبعا. وقبل بس لاقول انه نحن الحرش ما كان معروف للجيل الجديد خصوصا، ما كان معروف انه هو حق وما كان معروف انه هو حاجه. يعني هيدا اكثر 3 تحديات نحن عم نعاني منها. نحن هلا والمساحات العامة كمفهوم غير بالأماكن الأكاديمية، ما كان معروف شو يعني مساحات عام. حتى نحن مساحات عامة، حتى نحن صرنا هلا بنحكي بالمساحات العامة، بس بعد كانت لنا ما بنعرف شو يعني المساحات العامة بهديك الوقت. فكونا درسنا خصصنا بالمساحات العامة عبر التجربة والشغل على الأرض. وبالتالي نجحنا بنروج شو يعني شعبيا يعني المساحات العامة. نجحنا ونكون موجودين على كل الإعلام ونحكي ونأثر على صانع القرار بأنه يوعد بفتحه، وأيضا يجي على نقاش عام مع الناس وغيرها من النجاحات. طبعا بالسنة الثانية طبعا ما فتحوا، حجتهم كان قال بعد ما في خطة طريق لفتح الحرش. امنا كجمعية البارك يعني امنا كجمعية قدمنا الرود ماب كمان موجودة اونلاين بنحن بابليكيشن، كيف يفتحوا هيدا الحرش بشكل يصونوا يعملوا له صيانة ويخلوه نظيف وآمن وكل هالاشياء. لأنه كمان بأحد الدراسات بنقول الناس ما بتروح على المساحات العامة لأنها منا آمنة ومنا نظيفة. وبالتالي كمان اقترحنا لنتأكد إنه هيدا الشيء موجود بالمساحات العامة. ف طبعا هون البلدية بصير في إقرار لهيدا الملف لأنه كامل، وخصوصا بعد ما كان منطقة إيل دو فرانس اللي هي بتتعاطى مع بلدية بيروت كانت عاملة شراكة بتقول هيدا رود ماب ناجح جدا ويجب أخذه، وبتعمل هي دراسة وبتطورها. بيمرق سنة 2012 أول وعد وما بيفتحوه، 2013 تاني وعد وما فتحوه، وآخر وعد بال 2014 كمان ما فتحوه، وهلأ بيوعدونا قال بأول صيفية 2015 حيفتحوا. طبعا إذا ما نقول ليش ما عم يفتحوا، لأنه هن ما انهم هلا ما انهم مش ضد فتحه، لانه لاقوا طريقه يفتحوه بشكل انه بيجيبوا شركه خاصه، لانه هن كل الشغل اللي بتعملها للاسف البلديات هي بتعطي المال العام لشركات خاصة لتعمل أنفاق وجسور وباركينج تحت الأرض. يعني هي كل الفكرة أنه هاي المال العام خلينا نعطي لشركاتنا الخاصة، ولكن آخر شيء لاقوا أنه خلص بنفتح حرش بيروت بس بنجيب شركة خاصة تديره لحرش بيروت، بالتالي بندفع لهم. فتأخر هلأ فتح الحرش لأنه طبعا ما هن جروبات أو بوط، فمختلفين أي بوطة هي اللي حتديره لحرش بيروت، وبالتالي تاخد المال العام أو تاكل الجبنة مثل ما نحن بنقول ببيروت. بدي أقول إنه ببيروت 0.8 متر مربع في للفرد من المساحات الخضراء، بالوقت اللي منظمة الصحة العالمية بتقول 12 متر مربع لكل شخص. ببيروت نسبة النيتروجين دايوكسيد بالهواء هو 64، بالوقت اللي ماكسيموم لازم يكون 40 الماكسيموم. وحظنا حلو إنه على البحر، لو فيهم يعمروا على البحر كانت أسوأ الحالة. وبالتالي أول شغلة مفترض تعملها أي سلطة توصل على المكان هو إنه تفتح تزيل التلوث. بعدنا ما عم نحكي عن السمع البصري، بعدنا عم نحكي عن على الأقل هيدا، وتزيد المساحات الخضراء. إنجازات البلدية سوفار يعني بينبسطوا إنه زينوا جنينة الصنايع. أنا بيعملوها مشروع المينتنس تبعها وعملوها ريهابيليتيشن، بيعتبروها هيدا مشروع عظيم. يعني لقلنا هيدا تزيين، يعني عملوا حفلة وافتتاح ضخم لأنه زينوا، برافو عليهم، زينوا الجنينة. بالتالي ولكن الرقم بعده 0.8. والصدمة الأكثر إنه بكون في جنينات مثل اليسوعية الصنايع سابقا فجأة بصيروا بدهم يعملوا باركينج تحت الأرض، لأنه في مشكلة سيارات فبدهم يعملوا باركينج تحت الأرض. طبعا هيدا كمان أحد المشاريع من جنينة اليسوعية، وهيدا أحد المشاريع اللي رفضناها وكمان بلشنا نشتغل ضدها ووقفناها مؤقتا لحد هلا. ولكن بأرجي كيف البلدية هي أكثر مشغولة بأنها تعمل باركينج وتمشي السيارات وتروج للسيارات أكثر من أنها تعمل مشاريع عامة خضراء بتساعد المواطن وبتريح المواطن والطفل والشاب والأم والأب اللي عندهم أطفال وبحاجة يلاقوا مكان ينفسوا عنه. وهون بس قبل ما أكمل بدي أرجي فيديو سريع اسمحوا لي عن وعد بلدية بيروت، وفيديو صغير نحن عملنا له إياه موجود on يوتيوب. ما في صوت؟ لا في صوت.
خلينا نقول من هلا لاخر السنه ان شاء الله بتكون الامور صارت ماتشور انف انه نقوم بهالتجربه هاي ونرجع نمتع لبنان مثل ما انا تمتعت انا وصغير، متع هالشباب والصبايا باجمل جنه بوسط بيروت. الحرش سيفتح لجميع اللبنانيين وقريبا جدا. انا استاذ بالجامعه الامريكيه من 81 للا انسان صادق، لا انسان صادق، لا انسان صادق. إنسان الصادق بيتحمل مسؤولية كلامه.
ب 8 شباط 2012 بمسرح المدينة حضرتك أعطيتنا وعد إنه نفتح حرش بيروت بمهلة أقصاها سنة، وهيدا الوعد مسجل على اليوتيوب. حاليا نحن صرنا ب 2013 وبعد حضرتك ما نفذت هيدا الوعد. بدنا نحدد موعد بوجود الروتين الإداري لنفتح حرش بيروت.
أنا الحمد لله إنسان صادق ما بعرف أكذب. أنا الحمد لله إنسان صادق ما بعرف أكذب. أنا الحمد لله إنسان صادق ما بعرف أكذب. اليوم موضوع حرش بيروت ملف ماسكه نائب رئيس المجلس بالتعاون مع الإيل دو فرانس. اعطونا دراسه، ترجمت الدراسه، عم يشتغلوا فيها خبراء فرنسيين. عم تاخر الوعد. خبراء فرنسيين، تاخر الدراسه. خبراء فرنسيين بالتعاون مع فريق من المجلس البلدي عم نحط دفتر شروط كلام مزبوط، صرنا بالاواخر. يعني ان شاء الله خلال السنه الجديده باذن الله ما مفروض تطول بقى العمل.
يعني هلا بناخذ وعد بالسنه الجديده يفتح حرش بيروت.
انا لو بصح لي كنت افتحه باوائل 2013 ما قصرت.
لا بس ما فتح، انه بال 2014 بتوعدها
باذن الله.
باذن الله.
وبإذن الله لم يفتح حرش بيروت. كرمال تعرفوا عن شو عم نحكي، لأنه كمان فيكتوريا أول ما وصلت على بيروت قالت لي قال لي مساحة عامة بدي أقضها، روح شوفها، بما أنه فيكتوريا من غانا هلا حتحكي أكتر، ولكن فكرت وين بدي أقلها. يعني إذا بدي أقلها حرش بيروت، يعني this is حرش بيروت. You can see it. I told her you can see it in picture if you want. Now it's here. So this is the park we are talking about. واللي هو مسكر صار له فوق ال 22 سنة. إذا من هون لأقول إنه وهالجنينات اللي باقية، إذا مثل ما حكيت بلشوا يعملوا باركينج تحت الأرض. شو مشكلة؟ حنتقل للموضوع الثاني السريع. هن 3 مواضيع حكي فيهم: البابليك ترانسبورتيشن والوجهة البحرية. وقت نحكي عن البابليك ترانسبورتيشن، جنينات بدهم يعملوها باركينج تحت الأرض. مانينا ضد الباركينج بالمطلق نحن، ولكن لما يكون بس المشاريع اللي عم تعملها البلدية هي أنفاق وجسورة، وخصوصا بقلب المدينة، يعني ما حدا بعد بيعمل أنفاق وجسورة بقلب المدينة إلا إذا حالة استثنائية. نحن بيروت كلها أنفاق وجسورة. طبعا هيدا بيقسم المدينة، بيشوهها للمدينة، بس الأهم إنه هو بيزيد عجقة السير عكس ما كل الناس ممكن تفكر. لأنه أنت وقت تكون عم تعمل، يعني هيدي سياسة الجسر والنفق والباركينج هي سياسة لدعم التنقل بالسيارة بكل العالم. بيشتغلوا بلشوا public transportation، البايسيكل، كل هول الاشياء اللي الانسان، الووكينج، كل هول الاشياء، يعني بيعملوا رصيف، بيعملوا مكان للبسكليت الى اخره. كل الاشياء اللي بتشجع غير انواع تنقل، وهيك بخففوا التلوث السمعي البصري. اما ببيروت بس والله بدهم يخدموا الناس، هن بدهم يعملوا باركينج ليخدموا الناس. هذه الفكره طبعا، لكن هي حقيقه لصرف المال العام، لانه هيدي المشاريع الجسر والانفاق هيدي كمان مكلفه جدا. وطبعا بلديه بيروت بيقولوا ما انا ما خصني، ما انا مش انا المسؤوله عن اني اعمل نقل مشترك. وطبعا هيدا منه صحيح، لانه كثير من معظم الاشياء اللي بتحكي اللي بلديه بيروت بتحكيها بتكون عاده منا مزبوطه ومنا قانونيه. لانه القانون البلديات بقول رئيس السلطه التنفيذيه بالبلديه هو المسؤول عن انه يعمل، طبعا مش هقولها حرفيا، ولكن هو مسؤول عن يصير في نقل مشترك بالمدينه، ان كان بالتعاون مع غير بلديات او ان كان بتوكيل شركه خاصه، ان كان الى اخره، ولكن هو المسؤول مباشره عن هذا الموضوع. الحكومه مسؤوله حتما، ولكن اذا الحكومه ما عم تعمل شغلها رئيس البلديه يستطيع ان يقوم هذا الشيء. وببيروت استثنائيا رئيس، بس بهيدا الاستثناء الوحيد، عاده رئيس البلديه بيكون هو رئيس البلديه، اما رئيس البلديه ببيروت فهو المحافظ، محافظ مدينه بيروت. فهيدا موقفنا. لذلك نحن ضد اي نوع من مشاريع الباركينج والجسوره والانفاق من يوم ورايح، لانه بكل بساطه عم بيزيدوا المشكله بالمدينه وعم تتوجه للأسوأ. ثاني موضوع بدي احكيها، ثالث موضوع سريع بدي احكيه كمان، هو موضوع البحر. نحن بيروت على البحر 12 كيلومتر مربع، بطول 12 كيلومتر مربع. اذا بتطلعوا بالخريطه في عنا المرفق باول محل، عنا سوليدير كمان مكان خاص، عنا زيتونه باي كمان مكان خاص ومصمم بشكل بدك تنتبه ما تدقر شيء بلكي قريب. اخر شيء كمان عندنا هون المطاعم الخاصه، عندنا البرايفت ريزورت موجوده هون، عندنا المناره كمان في مطعم هنيك، عندنا كمان مسبح خاص للجيش، عندنا مطاعم الروشه، وعندنا البابليك بيتش اللي هو رمله البيضاء اللي هلا كمان طالبوا يسيجوه. تخيل انت، وهيدا بتشبه باليرمو، انت على باليرمو، هي جزيره سيسيلي كمان ما فيها مساحه عامه الا بتظهر ساعتين بريت المدينه. فنحن هون نحن ببيروت بطول 12 كيلومتر ما في مكان عام، ما في مساحه عامه. وهيدا بيخلي البلديه ثالث شيء مفترض تعمله بعد النقل العام وموضوع المساحات الخضراء، تفكر كيف ترجع العلاقه بالبحر. نحن لا فينا نشوف البحر بسبب التاورز، ولا فينا نوصل على البحر هلا بسبب الاسلاك الشائكه، بالاضافه الى كل الريزورت الخاص. طيب كيف الواحد في يكون جزء من هالمدينه؟ كيف في يكون ينتمي لهالمدينه؟ كيف يلتقي مع الاخر بمدينه؟ كيف؟ اذا المفاجئ طبعا انه الروشه صح في مطاعم فوق، ولكن في صخره الروشه تحت اللي هي هون، هيدي اخذتها من الطياره، هيدي مكان كثير مهم للبنان، لأنه بتعرفوا الروشة كل الناس بتيجي لتاخد صور هونيك لتتعرف على هيدي الصخرتين بشكلهم حلو بقلب المي. وطبعا إلها علاقة بالميثولوجيا، لأنه بالميثولوجيا كانوا يحكوا عن هيدي الصخرتين، هي كانوا يعتبروا بيروت كامرأة أو هون صدر المرأة بهيدي هون. وطبعا في كيفز تحت اللي بيعتبروه هو المدخل إلى رحم الأم، حيث عم تولد الأسماك والحياة، كل الحياة الإيكو والأسماك كلهم كانوا بيولدوا بهذه المغاور، لذلك هي غنية بهذا الموضوع. فطبعا نحن بيطلع بيعملوا شبك هون، ومثل ما شايفين الحجار هون الموجودين، لأنهم بدهم يعملوا كمان ريزورت خاص. وقت يعملوا ريزورت خاص نعم طبعا مش بس عم بيدمروا ميثولوجيا وتاريخ، هن عم بيدمروا الحياة البيئية والإيكولوجية بقلب المي. بس مش بس هيك، هالمغاور اللي هون مثل ما شايفينها عاش فيها الإنسان القديم من 40,000 سنة و20,000 سنة. فهن كمان بلا ما يجوا يعملوا هيدا المكان هو مكان لكل الناس. هون مثلا هيدي الصخرة اللي هون هي فيها معمل للإنسان القديم اللي كان يعمل حجارة الصوان والأدوات الصوان ليستخدمها، كلها موجودة هون وبالمغاور. فبلا ما يجوا يعملوها مكان أثري وبارك على البحر، لأنه ناقصنا هيدا الشيء مثل ما كل دول العالم، وبلا ما يحطوا الإيد عليها طبعا. وكمان لأنه هي مكان شعبي، بمعنى كل الناس كانت تنزل تسبح هون، كان في كتير أنشطة يكون موجودة بهذا المكان. يعني كل العالم وقتها مكان الناس تكون عم تستخدمه كملك عام، كانت الدولة وخصوصا أنه بيحمل من ذاكرة وقصص الناس، الدولة مفترض تحط إيد عليه، لأنه بتعتبره موقع ثقافي، بتصنفه موقع ثقافي. ولكن كمان للأسف بنلاقي أنه الدولة لا دغري، مش الدولة، اللي الشركات الخاصة بمرسوم خاص من الدولة، لأنه هيدي مكان حسب دراسات الإيل دي فرانس وحسب دراسات بلدية بيروت القديمة وحسب وزارة البيئة دراساتها وحسب اليونسكو بيعتبروها منطقة ثقافية وتاريخية وأثرية ممنوع وحرام أنه حدا يمس فيها. فبيطلع مرسوم خاص طبعا من الحكومة بأنه لا والله في أحد الشركات المالكة بدها تعمل ريزورت، فخلونا نشوف كيف خليهم يعملوا ريزورت. وطبعا بالإضافة إلى هيدا مكان سياحي في كان يطلع، لو كان في خطة مزبوطة نستفيد من هالمغاور ومن الآثار، هيدا مكان تاريخي بيطلع ملايين الدولارات. بفرنسا كنت دائما أقول إنه بفرنسا في برج إيفل، يعني اللي الإنسان عمله والحديث يعني، واللي حدايد يعني. نحن عنا منطقة صخرية واسمها اسمها الروشة، اللي فيها الإنسان القديم وتاريخه، فيها المغاور الطبيعية، في الكنز الطبيعي، وكله اللي بعد أهم ب100 مرة ما عم نعرف نستفيد منه ونعمل سياسة لنخلي كل العالم يجوا يحبوا يشوفوها مثل ما بيشوفوا بعلبك وغيرها. فهيدي واحدة من الجرائم البيئية اللي هلأ عم بتصير ببيروت، والإنسانية طبعا اللي عم بتصير ببيروت. بعد ما حطوا الشبك قلنا طيب بلشنا نعمل حملات مدافعة كرمال الشبك، نتفاجأ بأنه كمان المسبح الشعبي، شوف إذا حطت له صورة، الوحيد اللي ببيروت، طبعا ما كان مسبح بكل معنى الكلمة لأنه في 3 أساطيل مجارير، يعني مجارير بيروت بتصب فيه، ولكن بعده كان الأمل بأنه يكون المسبح الشعبي الوحيد ببيروت، لأنه بعد الفقراء جدا مش فرقاني معهم المجارير، فعم ينزلوا يسبحوا، اللي ما قادرين يتحملوا تكلفة المسابح الخاصة عم ينزلوا رغم كل شيء ويسبحوا. وبيطلع كمان أحد المشاريع الخاصة بيطلب أنه خلونا نعمله مسبح خاص. أوكي. وطبعا وكمان هيدا بلدية بيروت شو بتقول والله أنا تحت الدرابزين ما خصني. نحن كل شيء تحت درابزين، يعني وقت نطلب منا انه الحل انه بلدية بيروت تستملك، لانه بحق لها كسلطة تستملك المكان وقت تعتبره مكان عام، فطلبنا منها تستملكه، فبتقول بكذا مرة بالاعلان انه لا نحن ما خصنا. اضطرينا نطلع لها بعض المواد القانونية، منها المادة 74 من قانون البلديات، وعملناه شوي بتصرف بشكل مهضوم انه من فوق الدرابزين لتحت المزراب مسؤوليتك يا ريس. يعني بمعنى هي بقانون 74 لا بتعتبر انه كل الاملاك العامه اللي بضمن منطقه البلديه هي مسؤوليه البلديه. الحق العام ما بينشرى وما بينباع. قانون 1925 بيصنف الرمل والحصى ملك عام، وطبعا انه تسمحوا لشركات تتملكها هيدي مخالفه للقانون، وما فيها تبيعها وتشتري الى اخره. قانون المادة 33 من قانون البيئة بسنة 2002 444 ممنوع عرقلة الولوج الحر للسواحل، ممنوع حدا يحدد لي كيف بدي فوت، يعني كل هيدي ممنوعة. وإن شاء الله قريبا هو حتشوفون على شوارع بيروت كل هالقوانين على الحيطان. وبحسب المادة 12، طبعا مش حلحق احكي عن شو نحن عم نعمل بس عم بشرح الوضع. مادة 12 من قانون 1939 ممنوع حجب النظر، تركيب عواميد وأسلاك، وممنوع تحديد عقارات في المواقع والمناظر الطبيعية. مادة 29 من قانون البيئة كمان من صلاحيات وزارة البيئة إدارة وتنظيم وحماية المواقع الطبيعية. بحسب المادة 74 كمان من واجبات السلطة التنفيذية لبلدية بيروت حماية البيئة والمناظر الطبيعية والآثار التاريخية. من هون نحن بنعتبر إنه هيدي واجبهم. وآخر شيء بس بدي أقول إنه نحن بس في قانون 1925 وفي الماستر بلان اللي قالت إنه هيدي منطقة 10 من الدالية للروشة لرملة البيضاء الممنوع العمار عليها. قاموا طلعوا قانون جديد قال بيسمحوا إذا كانت شركة خاصة بس على شرط تكون تتملك أكثر من 20,000 متر مربع. بعدين بس بدنا تعطي 25% للبلدية. بعدين لغوا 25% للبلدية حسب التواريخ. بعدين قالوا طب إذا عنده 20 بحق له يستثمر أضعافه بالبحر، يعني إذا عندك 20,000 بحق لك تستثمر 60,000 بجوات البحر. يعني هلأ الروشة 120,000 متر مربع، يعني بحق لك تستثمر 360,000 متر مربع إلى آخره. بلشت القوانين عم تتدرج، ولكن القوانين كمان موجودة كمان ما حلحق عرضها. لكن بأرجي كيف كل يوم يعني كيف بيعملوا شيء مخالف بيرجعوا ما حدا بيعترض، بيرجع بيشجعهم يعملوا قانون بخالف اكثر 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 الى ان يوصلوا. هلا الجشع وصل لانه هلا فيهم يعملوا بالروشه ورمله البيضاء 360 متر مربع استثمار بقلب البحر، يعني عم يردموا البحر وعم يعملوا اشياء غير قانونيه، والقانون ما عم يحكي شيء وعم يسمح لهم. هن عم يخترعوا، طبعا عم يعملوا القوانين. اخيرا بدي اقول هيدا لنا الحياه ببيروت كمان حسب منظمه الصحه العالميه غير صالحه للسكن. الانسان ببيروت مهدد. الحياه في بيروت اصبحت اكثر معقده، والعنف عم بيزيد والكره عم بيزيد. فالحياه مهدده ببيروت، مش بس البيئه، والانسان مهدد في بيروت. لذلك مطلوب من الجميع التكاتف ونحمي هيدي المدينة التاريخية، المدينة اللي هي كانت نقطة وصل بين كل العالم، وتحتوي على ومعروفة مدينة الثقافة بالعالم. شكرا لكم.
Thank you for this interesting presentation. We will discuss at the end about the three presentations together. Then now it's time to Merve to talk about her experience in Turkey. And she will present something, some example of the activity she's working on to create more livable cities. I don't want to use sustainable because I think livable is more important. And she worked also in improve the pedestrianization and giving more space to people instead of car. Then, thank you, Mark.
Before my presentation, I would like to thank FES and Issam Fairs Institute at American University. Today my presentation will be about Historic Peninsula Pedestrianization Project, but not the pedestrianization project, but about the current state assessment. Pedestrianization is a human approach that improves living conditions in the cities, and especially in city centers, provides ease of access for pedestrians, and depending on the streets and roads on which it's implemented, brings economic growth. With this idea, as Embark Turkey, we are working on many sustainable transportation projects, and our project is about Historical Peninsula. Is one of the most important and vulnerable project for us, because we are working in Historic Peninsula for 4 years now. We are the authors, my colleague Çiğdem Çörek, Öztaş. We both organizers and the coordinators, and we work together in the field. She's an urban planner like me. And now you see this Embark Turkey. I believe that first I need to talk about the organization that I'm involved. A member of Embark Network, a non-profit program of the WRI, World Resources Institute. And we have many centers in the worldwide, India, China, Brazil, Mexico, and Turkey also. And in Turkey, we work together with local authorities to reduce pollution, improve public health, and create safe, accessible, and attractive urban public spaces. And for Historic Peninsula, we also collaborated with local authorities like Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality and Fatih Municipality. And you see the area. We are in Beirut for presentation, and you see the Istanbul. And Historic Peninsula is the very important part of the Istanbul. And about study area, it was Historic Peninsula is the old city center of Istanbul, where the city grows, and holds all the settlements of Istanbul also, dating more than 8,000 years back. And it's currently a significant historical, touristic, and commercial center of Istanbul, and also a very busy transportation hub. Has different functions. Historic Peninsula has many different functions that clustered in different areas. For example, Eminönü district still has a mixture of residential and commercial usage, which that wholesalers and retail sector is there. Education is another important part of the Historic Peninsula. One of the most important campuses, Istanbul universities, is in the area. And campus located with Üstlaleli, and it brings student population to the area. You see that land usage now. It's all mostly commercial, but little bit residential at the same time. Education is important, as I said, in the middle. And about transportation linkage, Historic Peninsula is an important transportation hub, serviced by different transportation modes, like ferries, subways, and light rail system, and buses. And just last year, they opened 2 new subway systems to Historic Peninsula, and it became even busier nowadays. And the resident population in the Historic Peninsula is only 55,000, but however, daytime population is 2.5 million. So it's a big contrast, and it shows us that how this pedestrianization and making city more walkable is important in making that part of the city more walkable. And the area established identity as a commercial center that attracts many urban users, not only Istanbul, but whole Turkey sometimes. And if you look before photographs of the Historic Peninsula, before pedestrianization, we saw that intra-city parking and traffic-dominated pedestrian environments, and a challenged visual environment, monuments and important public spaces suffer under uncoordinated urban elements. And when we look to walking environment, it's a challenging walking environment, poor maintenance of footways, footway obstacles, several barriers divide the city, and pedestrian congestion. A complicated crossing that I can't say that even after pedestrianization, this is still a problem, crossings, intersections. And if you look how we started, how did this pedestrianization project began, we can say that before Embark Turkey started to work there was an always idea that people, the Historic Peninsula should be pedestrianized, because it's a vulnerable area for whole Istanbul and Turkey, and also it has very historical background, and as I told you before, daytime population is 2.5 million. So to make the city more livable, there should be some process, something to make it better. So actually the municipality began to work in Historic Peninsula in 2005. But when we involved, it was 2010, you see there. As Embark Turkey, we invited a Denmark-based firm, Gale Architect, maybe some of you know it. It's their standard methodology, actually, they implement in the cities, especially public spaces and public life. So we worked them together, and we make the survey, and we also work with local administrations and stakeholders in the area to develop better solutions. And in that survey, 22 streets and connections and 13 squares and parks analyzed as a representative selection. An outcome report will be published. What we do is current state assessment. After 3 years later, after 3 years that this project, Public Life and Public Spaces Survey project, published, we also presented to the local municipalities and stakeholders. And after that, municipalities started to pedestrianize at the Historic Peninsula phase by phase. And then we wanted to see, after 3 years, how do people feel about pedestrianization project, especially the people that works there, and also the students and also the Istanbul residents. What do they think about it? And we just finished this June. We made the launching of the project. And you see, this is the mayor of Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, Kadir Topbaş. And the other, Michael Bloomberg, who is the founder of the project. And also we are still working on Historic Peninsula. This is the impact assessment of Historic Peninsula pedestrianization project on air quality. Our project coordinator and environmental engineer are still working on it. This project hasn't published yet. I'm just want to tell that. And to come to our analysis, that current state assessment project, there is, you see that 4 different regions, sub-regions. One of them is Eminönü, that I told you before, this is the commercial district. Sirkeci and Sultanahmet is the touristic district, mostly. Alt Laleli is the, again, commercial district. And Üst Laleli is the mostly affected by university, because the university just next to it. So mostly used by the students. So this is the 4th phase of the pedestrianization project. The municipality started the pedestrianization project with Eminönü in 2011. And so we conducted surveys all these areas, and more than 1,000 people we able to reach. And how do they feel about pedestrianization project? And well, this is these surveys are October 2013. So I can say that after that, the 2 main transportation project started. One of them is Marmaray, which connects Anatolian side to European side. Another was the Taksim to Yenikapı subway project. So maybe transportation, people's transportation choice might be changed, or the ideas might be changed. But there is still, maybe we can conduct another survey later, I'm about to say, because there is some huge, another project in the Historic Peninsula that still goes on. So if we look to social structure, as I mentioned before, we conducted 3 surveys. One of them is for residents. Another one, this is Istanbul residents. Another was for students. And the third one is employees and business owners. The 2 in the beginning, residents and students surveys conducted online, and employees, business owners, student owners surveys conducted in the area. We mainly focus on employees and business owners because the historic peninsula, and historically, actually, has commercial background. So the people use the area, actually, these people who live there and who really see the changes every day. And as we see there, in contrast to gathered residents and students data, the majority of the people associated with local business are men. Well, we can say for working class, it's mostly dominated by men. And we have retailer and wholesaler employees and business owners, and we were asked them impact of pedestrianization about on timing and choice of route of the delivery day and collection activities. 50% of respondents indicated that pedestrianization benefited their delivery and collection activities. This was important for us because we always say that we always find out that when you try to conduct this huge project about pedestrianization, first in the beginning, always the business owners and people, that employees rejected. They don't like the pedestrianization project because they say that the people come here, use their cars, they will reject being pedestrianizated. So that was important for us that they will be happy in the end. After 3 years, they really like the project because they think that their timing and delivery thing is now being organized because of the hard regulation. And when we look opportunities of access, we see that the most commonly used transportation types are railway system and ferry. But we can say that most of them choose public transportation. That's a good thing. Well, as Embark Turkey, we are also working on cycling projects. So to see that only 1% of the surveys, but to see that bike is also happy for make us happy. And road safety is another issue and another important topic for us. Okay, the municipality pedestrianizated the streets, and more than nearly 300 streets pedestrianizated in the whole area. But we know that after you make this street pedestrianizated, you push the traffic to the buffer areas. So we also have problems in that sections. So we try to understand how the road safety changed and what happened. And we find out when we make our face-to-face surveys that we find out there was a real relief in the area for pedestrians, but in the end, there is a big issue, big problem with motorcycle, carts, and porters, especially motorcycles. In this, especially the last phase of the pedestrianization project, the Üstlerli section, they told us that the injury of the crashes because of motorcycle increased. So this is an important outcome that because these hydraulic barriers couldn't stop them. They could stop the cars maybe, but they couldn't stop motorcycles because they are more flexible, and it causes more traffic accidents. So it's an important outcome that maybe municipality makes some regulations on it. And thoughts on physical environment is also important for us. When we ask the people if you are happy about pedestrianization project, we collected the data that people says that 80% of the people says that yes, we are really happy about pedestrianization. Now we can walk better safely. But when you ask details to people, you find out that more detailed and more realistic conclusions. For example, people, all of them, residents, students, and employees, business owners, all of them think that overall outlook of streets are better. Space for walking is getting better. But with this, street guidance and public transport possibilities doesn't change. So this is important because people think that that we can say that street guidance, especially in historic peninsula, that the most common place that you try to gain tourists and all people and local and international tourists. So you should have a proper street guidance. And after all this analysis, well, it's actually, there's much more analysis, but in the end, I will share with you the link so you can look the PDF version of the report. Suggestions and assessment. We made some suggestions. First of all, accessibility for all. Pedestrianization projects are great. So we create some places for pedestrians and open spaces. But if we don't think about as a whole of the thing, it doesn't actually helps the thing, it helps the city. For example, accessibility. When we open that streets to pedestrians, we don't imagine about all of the groups, like older ones, childs, and disabled people. So first of all, when we create places, we think about universal designs, and the place should be accessible for all the people. So this is our main suggestion. The city should be accessible for all of the people. And another thing is, especially in the beginning, I told you that after they pedestrianizated the streets, they pushed the traffic to the buffer zones. So that means that intersections are really problematic. So we should prioritizing pedestrians. If we said that we make this area for pedestrians and we pedestrianizated the streets, we should make sure that the area, especially for pedestrians. So you see some of the cars can pass illegally, or we have this is very busy intersection. That tramway also allowed, some of the cars can pass, and we have pedestrians here. So as pedestrianizated streets, you think that you can pass easily, but then you realize that after you come really close with a car, that, oh, I should be careful. And most of the time you saw that in some main streets, people keep walking in the pavement, even though it is pedestrianizated. And parking solutions and tour buses is another problem. Especially, still we have some major and important squares in the historic peninsula, but we don't, we let cars park there. So that's another issue. If you have squares and if you say that this area for pedestrians and human-oriented city now, maybe you should organize your parking solutions outside the city and create some other transportation options. So people prefer coming with mostly public transit and leave their car, or maybe they can walk, and leave their car outside this pedestrianizated areas. And mass transportation system and integration is another problem. We saw that, well, it's well integrated, especially when you look all over the Istanbul. In historic peninsula, you can say that the mass transportation system integrated quite well. But this is another issue about accessibility, that you should manage the streets, manage the squares and areas to pedestrians as well. So it's a really complicated hub in the historic peninsula. Effective and safe walking networks. So this is another issue also. Not only making streets for pedestrians, not only closing them for a limited hour, but also should have guidelines maybe for specific for the area that have level of the streets, so people can have some routes to walk around and explore the city. But for now, we only have that street that is closed and some of the streets that has been renewed. So we should have good, effective, and safe walking network for people, especially some of the areas. And public spaces is also important for us, because after we make the survey, we know that 2 squares and areas are reorganized by the municipality. So they are all good improvements. And people, when you make these implementations, you saw that people use the area. When you put some benches, you saw that people need to sit and people use this area. And so if you want to make Historic Peninsula more livable, we should reorganize public spaces and maybe put some hierarchy on these public spaces. Some of them should be organized as major public spaces, big areas, and some of them may be organized as little neighborhood park areas. So, and make this more effective and should all of the people benefit from all these things. And this is my short presentation. Thank you so much. This is a link, that whole document, PDF version. If you want to look more deeply, and if you have, I need to be quick, so I really keep it compact. But if you have any further questions, I would love to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now there is Victoria, that she's an urban planner, but she's also a communication specialist. And she founded a website that is African Urbanism. And I visited, I found it really interesting, and thank you. And she worked in Accra, Ghana, and she used to be involved to focus more on stakeholder engagement and participatory urban development. Then,
Okay, good afternoon. First of all, thank you so much to the FES and the American University of Beirut for the opportunity to be here. As I was introduced, as you know, I'm coming from West Africa, Ghana, and it's been especially exciting for me to sort of learn about the experiences in the North Africa and the Middle East and try to compare that to my own experience in West Africa. I hope that with my presentation looking at public spaces and community engagement, hopefully we'll find some common threads of similarity and we can have a nice dialogue about sort of what works, what doesn't work, and then moving forward. So the title of my presentation is, Reimagining Public Spaces in Accra, Ghana, because I want to talk about sort of this dislocation between the formally planned public spaces and the sort of informal or organic communities, social spaces that sort of take place. It's interesting as well, I'll say, because a lot of the challenges that we've discussed in terms of public spaces, both yesterday and today, we see a lot of these same experiences in Accra. So first, I just want to give some background about the location. So Ghana, obviously in West Africa, the capital is Accra. Ghana is very much a new democracy, independence from the British in 1957, so 57 years of independence. There's 27 million people that live in Ghana. It's a very stable, peaceful, democratic society. And very recently, there's been a sort of economic boom. A few years ago, there was the discovery of oil reserves in the western region of Ghana. And so in 2010, the government brought in international private sector agencies to begin extraction of oil and natural gas. The GDP last year of Ghana was $103 billion. And now, just 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Ghana was actually reclassified by the World Bank as a lower middle-income country. So going from a low-income country to a lower middle-income country. So that's a little bit of context. So when we talk about sort of like neoliberalism, when we talk about this, the challenges of economic development, or what's happening in the urban space, we're definitely seeing that in Ghana. So Accra now in particular, as I said, it's the capital of Ghana, 2.3 million people. There's an annual growth rate of 2.6%. As you can see in this diagram, the population of Accra is growing it's increasing at an increasing rate. That's because Accra is both the economic center of Ghana. It's the financial center and the administrative center. It's also becoming sort of a regional trade and investment hub within West Africa, particularly for Anglophone West Africa. There's immense rural to urban growth, but at the same time, more than 60% of Ghanaians are employed in the informal economy. So when we talk about this, a lot of economic development through oil extraction and like there's agriculture, there's trade and investment, but at the same time, the vast majority of Ghanaians are employed in the informal sector, so very insecure livelihoods. And as well, I just want to point out that this is a demographic breakdown of the population just of Accra, and of the more than 2 million people, about 56% of the population are below 24 years of age, so we're also talking about a very young population within the city. So I'm here to talk about parks and public spaces in Accra, and one of the interesting things is that if you Google parks in Accra, Ghana, and this is what pops up on the different parks that you can find within the city, but these are sort of formally planned, formally spaces that are called parks within the city, whether or not they're actually accessible or convenient for people to access. What's interesting is that, we have this list of parks here, one of which, is Afua Sutherland Children's Park. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. But some of the major challenges are the fact that, just as we've seen here in Beirut, you have parks that are fenced off. People cannot always enter those parks. We have parks that you actually have to pay to enter. We have parks that are basically private spaces that are managed by private sector companies, and they're sort of paraded as parks. So first I want to talk about Afua Sutherland Children's Park. This is the largest park in the city of Accra. It's a 12-acre green space within the city. It's located near the city center, and this is taken from inside the park. And it's a beautiful park, as you can see. I think it's beautiful. It's a wide expanse of green land. You have beautiful large trees. You have a bench there in the lower left-hand corner. You even have a Ferris wheel. And aesthetically, it looks very, very nice. And then I want to show you a photo of the park from outside. And you can actually see that this is the fence that barricades the park. And not only that, but the entire park is enclosed in a fence. And in addition, this park is managed by the Ministry of Women and Children's Affairs, and they have a gatekeeper, basically a security guard who works there, who is in charge of only allowing certain reputable people inside. I took these photos on a Saturday afternoon, and I was allowed inside because obviously I have an American accent, I'm a foreigner. But while I was there for about an hour in this particular instance. And there were 2 young boys who were probably about 14, 15 years old who were attending a church seminar down the street. And there was a break, they wanted to come stop by the park, and the guard would not let them in. And I said, oh, well, why won't you let him in? Why won't you let these guys in? He said, oh, well, you never know what they're going to do, these kids these days. They're always getting into trouble. Maybe they're going to get involved in drugs or that sort of thing. So this is just a couple more shots of the park where you can sort of see how it's a really beautiful space, but it's very empty because of the challenges that I've told you about, in the sense of the idea, the conception when it comes from the planning agency is that if you allow people within the park, they will destroy and break down the park, and they'll destroy the benches. Maybe they'll pee out. Oh, me later. In one day. Okay. And so what you end up having is very few people are actually able to enter within the park, and then it's empty most of the time. Maybe you get excited because you see this one person in the park. That person actually works at the park. There's another park within the city of Accra. I didn't find a photo. I wasn't able to add a photo, but it's called Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park. This is named after the president of Ghana, who's very much held as a political, ideological hero. It's also located just in close proximity to one of the lowest income areas within the city. This is a park that's sort of considered a tourism space. So this is one of the parks that you have to actually enter into. And it costs, I think, maybe like 5 Ghana cedis or so, which is really just about $4, something like that. But that's more than a lot of people who live in this area make in a day. And then this is another park. This is Akoije Park, which is also another sort of nationalist leader from the pre-independence period. This is a good example of the emptiness of parks, and also there's a church, a very popular church next door, and this park basically doubles as a car park, or like a parking lot most of the time. It's also a park, but it's a park for cars, not a park for people. So, okay, so I've tried to take you through some of the challenges when it comes to these sort of existing parks with quotations in the city. And then I want to talk about, what's missing, because just because these parks are enclosed, they're not accessible to people, doesn't mean that people don't find their own ways of congregating in their own sort of social spaces. That's what I want to talk about now. And I want to talk about some of the factors in my own research and my experience and working on different initiatives that I found that contribute to Accra's most vibrant social spaces that are not actually parks. So number one is, someone once told me, what makes, in Ghana, it's not about the space that brings people together, it's the event. And this is a perfect instance of that. This is sort of this building, also in this area known as Jamestown, just down the street from that Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum where you have to pay to get into. And this is in this area of Jamestown, low-income area, but this is it used to be built in like the 1920s. It was a store, and there was a fire at some point. Now it's just this open sort of Coliseum area, but it's an open area located basically just right in the heart of this neighborhood. And this is where kids will come and they'll play football on like Saturday mornings or in the evenings. This is the place where when people want to have maybe their wedding receptions, they'll come here and they'll organize it there. They'll decorate the space and they'll have it there. This is a place where maybe when there are community meetings and that sort of thing, they hold them here. So there's a lot of actually like community life in these spaces. There's a lot of events and there's a lot of social activities that go on. As well, commercial activity. I mentioned before that Accra is basically 60% of the residents, the people that come from Ghana, are engaged in the informal sector. And so this is an example of that, because the other planning challenge in the city of Accra is that there's not a lot of mixed-use development. There's not a lot of planned mixed-use development. There's a lot of single-use buildings that are constructed. So maybe like one building will be a bank. The next building will be like a grocery store. The next building will be like a telecommunications, like a phone company office. But you don't have a lot of mixing. So like this idea of having, a multi-story building where the ground floor is like a restaurant or something, and the top floors are apartments or offices, you don't really see that formally in Accra. But what you do see is a lot of informal activity on street sides, along roads, where people who are engaged in the informal economy will set up shop and they'll sell food, they'll sell mobile credit, they'll sell whether it's like household items, that sort of thing. And so you can see that here in the foreground of this photo, this woman is actually selling roasted yam to this gentleman, and this is just a street corner. And then behind her, there are some informal shops that have set up. People actually take shipping containers, and they will purchase those and they'll place those basically maybe like in front of a house. They get the permission from the person who owns the property, and they'll set up shop, and that's how they'll operate out of that shop. Here's another example of, key is accessibility and transport linkages. This is something we've talked about a lot, I think, at this conference in terms of people making places more walkable, that sort of thing. And it's key when it comes to public spaces because the earlier photo that I showed you of A4 Sutherland Park, it's really beautiful, but I'm not going to go through traffic congestion. I'm not going to pay lots of money to get there. I want to find a place that's within a walking distance of my own neighborhood of where I live. And so this is actually another car park, smaller car park, where there's a family that lives behind there. You can see that blue door. Behind there, there's a residence. And this is the people that live there. They came, they bring trees. Sorry, they planted a tree there. They bring chairs, and they come and they sit there on the evenings and then on the weekend. Because it's accessible, it's right there. And then you have, as well, people who also live nearby will also come and spend time there. And then supporting infrastructure, what we sometimes call, like street furniture. Sometimes it's as simple as chairs and shade. This is a bench that these two guys constructed out of some wooden slabs, and they nail them together, and that's where they sit and they eat their food and they watch people as they walk by. maybe they want to talk to a pretty girl, that sort of thing. But, you know, Ghana is also a place where, you know, maybe 300 days out of the year, it's a sunny day. We're basically on the equator and across, so it's really, really hot, as you guys have, I'm sure, experienced here as well. And sometimes creating this sort of conducive environment to social activity and resting spaces is just as simple as providing, you know, like chairs and shade, and that's enough. And then as well, you know, safety and security is key. But I do think it's sort of, it goes in this sort of loop, right? Because when you, number one, people want to spend time with people that they already know. But at the same time, when you create a space where people who live next door to each other, around each other, don't necessarily know each other, but they can come and they can relax and they get to know one another. And so it's actually sort of, I think about it as like a community creating space where, you know, maybe people don't know each other before, but it's a place where they can get to know their neighbors, and that in turn, that builds social capital, and that in turn can help make the place where they live actually more safe. This example, I'll just say briefly that these men in this photo, they actually come from the northern part of Ghana, and they had come, you know, there's a huge real estate boom at the moment in Ghana, and they actually work in construction, and this was like on a weekend, and they didn't know each other in the north, and they all sort of found themselves relocating in the same apartment that's behind these container shops here. And this is where they come maybe like in the afternoons to sort of get to know each other, relax. You can see their shops behind there. This guy rides his bicycle, and he sort of parks it nearby there, and they just sit and they talk and they chat about things. So now I want to talk about, I think I've tried to take you through some of the challenges as well as some of the common themes that we see coming together when it comes to public spaces and social spaces. And then I want to talk about a couple of initiatives that I've worked on in my approach when it comes to trying to work with communities in order to improve these public spaces. So a lot of the photos that I've been showing you are from this area known as Jamestown and Old Accra. It's basically the oldest, it's the historic district of Accra. It's basically where Accra began as a fishing village more than 200 years ago. But it's through a series of events. Basically, the British colonial government was located there. After independence, it was moved out. And basically, once that happened, there was a lot of economic decline in this area. So now it's a very low-income area. It's an area where you have a lot of built-up density in terms of informal housing. There's a lot of lack of access to whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's water, whether it's sanitation. You also have a very young population. You have a very high level of unemployment. But at the same time, it's a very culturally rich place. This is a place where, if you can imagine, the first president of Ghana was imprisoned in a prison on this just near here, and it's recognized by UNESCO as like a World Heritage spot, and it's just being allowed to become dilapidated. So there's a lot of it's very culturally rich, but not necessarily economically rich. So one of the initiatives that I worked on was trying to transform a car park into a people's park. This was during a 2-day period here in Jamestown. And, okay, yes. So basically, I was literally walking with a friend down the street, and this is when we saw this same view, and we were struck by the fact that there was a tree there. And when we went to speak with the patriarch or the head of household in this space, he told us that, oh, he's the one who built the tree there because, you know, he wanted some shade, and then they put out the chairs, and he just wanted his family to have a place to sort of sit. And we said, oh, well, you know, maybe if there's something that we can do, can we partner with you, and we can try to, you know, maybe improve this space, try something a little bit different, see, you know, during the weekends when it's not used by cars, maybe we could try to make it more conducive for some of your children and their friends to come and relax. And he said, sure, that sounds like a great idea. But he was like, oh, but we don't have to pay anything, right? And I said, well, it's not necessarily about the money, it's more about like the physical investment, right? Like the labor and that sort of thing. So, you know, one of the big things that we did is we really tried to engage with the community and the stakeholders who live and operate and use this space. We wanted to get a sense of what their vision was in terms of how do they use this space. If we could work with them to improve this space, what would that look like? How would they like to see this space improved, and how would that contribute to their own sort of sense of the character of their area? And so we spoke with the family. This is the head of household. His name is Mr. Ajay. We spoke with the man who's in charge of basically managing this car park. We spoke with some of the residents who live near this area and then used this space as well to get their ideas. And then we worked in collaboration with the community, especially the young kids who live in the area. So we decided that we wanted to resource materials from within this space and see how we could use that to improve within the space of Jamestown in general, and see how we could use that to improve this specific car park. So there's a lot of discarded tires that are in this area for whatever reason. And so we worked with the kids to basically collect about 80 tires. And we bought some paint and we painted the tires with the kids. We purchased some, they had a garden. I showed you that tree, and just, they had planted some plants there. So we purchased some additional plants and we tried to add to their garden. And then I just want to show you the before and then the after. So you can sort of see just the general layout, nothing big at all, just adding a little bit of color, adding a little bit of garden features. And then what was really interesting was to see how the park then in turn got used over the space of 2 days. It was so interesting because, this is a space where these kids typically don't have a place to play, so they end up playing on the street. So maybe they're competing with cars when it comes to for their recreation area, or on the sidewalk, or in an alley, or something like this. So it's interesting to see how they played in this space and then how they used the different features. And this is just some additional photos from this. And it was really interesting because, Ghana is about 60% Christian, 30% Muslim, 10% of, Ghanaians practice maybe like traditional African religions. But there can often be a lot of separation between the different ethnicities as well as people of different religions. And it was really interesting to see how all these different types of people coming to use this space, which doesn't really happen very often. And then I want to talk about another initiative that I did not organize, but I was a part of. About 4 years ago, it's really interesting to see the role that art can play when it comes to the improvements of public spaces. I think that art tends to be very unifying. I think that we all, no matter where you come from, when something is pretty, we all can admire it and sort of enjoy it, whether or not we understand that much about public spaces or community development or things like that. And so there's basically a collective of artists, and cultural planning organizations that I worked with, and they organized this annual street art festival. They've done it for the 4th year this year, and at the end of August. And when they first started the street art festival, it was literally just out of their pocket, because the challenge also is that there's not a lot of government support for these types of initiatives. And so sometimes you have to demonstrate to the government what's possible, and then you can get them to sort of buy into your idea. So basically, the idea was to take this long stretch of a street, it's probably about 800 meters, and then try to get approval to have that street pedestrianized for the day or the 2 days of the festival, and then just to allow people organizing a series of different artistic installations, so including murals, including street graffiti, including street performances, including theater, including dance, to engage the different residents and then the tourists who came to this area, this is Jamestown again, to see how we can, at least for the duration of this festival, we can bring people to the area and help to educate them about the history of Jamestown, its cultural richness, and then use Jamestown sort of as a canvas to display some of the local artistic creativity within the country. So you can see some of the interesting photos here as well. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's a very strong boxing culture. It's one of those things where when the young people, there's not a lot of opportunity. But for example, there's a lot of very prominent boxers that come out of Ghana and have gained a very strong international reputation. So kids from a very young age will look at boxing sort of as a way of getting out of the community and making some money. So they'd organize like a boxing ring along the street side. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see there's a bicycle stunt group that did stunts. In the lower left-hand corner, this is a performance artist. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you can see, again, some bicycle stunts. And then what was also just really interesting was, this festival was also about capitalizing on the way that people use space in general already, and sort of showcasing that. So, a lot of times it was interesting because you can see, I think here, the juxtaposition of maybe the people who came specifically for this street art festival, and then in the foreground you can see these are residents who live here, and they're just doing their thing, but now they can do it, and now they sort of have the means to do it within the street. They don't necessarily have to, it's like this space that is the street and the sidewalk has literally become a democratic space for everyone. So it's been really interesting, I think, in these initiatives. They're just sort of starting. I think I'm very new at this, but it's been interesting to see how there are these prevailing accessibility issues, but when it comes to places like streets and sidewalks and street corners, they're much more democratic in a sense, because no one can pay, you don't have to pay anyone to enter, you don't have to ask anyone if you can come and sit on the sidewalk. It's literally open to everyone, and it's a place where everybody uses it, so it brings people together. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Then, thank you very much. It was really interesting, and I would like to come to Ghana to see this interesting atmosphere you showed to us. Before to give to you the time to ask some questions, I want briefly only outline some points that I think are really interesting, and they came out from these three presentations. First, we talked a lot about public, but we have to understand really what does it mean. Personally, I think that most of the time we approach the public space with a lot of misconcept. And for example, I'm not Lebanese, and the first time I arrived here in Lebanon, the first things at the first place I visited was the Corniche. And I thought, wow, this is really an interesting public space. But after 3 years, and after a lot of discussion with different people, and also with all my students, I figure out that it's not public at all. There are students in this university that never have been on this place. Then this is part of this misconcept of what does it mean public. Corniche is not fenced, but there are a lot of people that, for prejudice, doesn't use the space. Then, for me, public doesn't mean that open to all, and it's a place in which we try to meet the difference. And then we have to be ready to have this place in which different people, that it doesn't mean different political parties or religious party, but different people as individuality, they can meet and share place and opinion together. Maybe there is a question that it's related with the, not cultural, but if we are ready to really have public space. Another thing that I want to discuss also is the difference between space and place. Because space, it's a physical area, but place, it's not only physical. It's also area in which there is memory, there is identity, there are people. Then this is a differentiation. And I want to outline what you show us between formal and informal, because most of the case, the informal place, they are place and no space, because there is this identity, these memories, this way of creating community, as you outlined, that in most of the public space, it's not there. And then it's not a question if the space or place are planned or not, if how people is ready to approach the different situation. Then, and I want also to discuss briefly things that first it's quality of life. What does it mean, quality of life? We cannot say that the things you show us are really high standard, but we can say that there is a lot of quality of life. Then most of the time we mixed quality with money, and these two things are never related. And we have to make a differentiation. Quality is related with health, that is mentally and physical health. And then it's related with pollution, yes. It's related with presence of green, yes, but it's also related with the state of mind. And this are things, the state of mind is something that we never take in consideration. And we use also in the participatory process to try to relate with people asking need. And every time we ask about need, we discuss about physical component, but maybe we have to be able and ready to read the things that are not so evident. We once one landscape architect that say to a student that we have to be able to wear glasses. I have already glasses. Sometimes I remove all to see things differently. And because we have to change our way to approach space, to approach people, to talk with people. And now we use a lot to do a questionnaire to try to understand if people need or doesn't need things. But maybe we have to start again to read from the traces, from this appropriation on the street, the way we use also the street every day to reinterpret it, to understand what really people need. And we talked about accessibility, and then another time I want to outline that there is physical accessibility. Yes, we talked a lot about fence, and it's true that in this part of the world most of the public space are fenced, but there are also other fences that are not visible, that are more difficult to pass through and to remove, and then we have to consider also these fences. And freedom. You talked about democracy, but I want to talk about freedom because I come from Sicily, and I have to say that as you outlined, I live in a similar environment. And it's difficult to talk about freedom because most of the time we think that it's only our freedom and we don't care about the freedom of the other ones. Then maybe we have also to start thinking how our action could transform or could also affect the freedom of the other ones. This is the first things we have to take in consideration when we want to create a community. Otherwise, because community is not an addition of individuality, we have to try to give something to have something. Then, another important things are the events. It's true, because without events, without activities, there is not public life. And there are a lot of new public space that are without activities. And we have to try to mix things together. And I want also to conclude with one thing that I feel is really important, that it's how we can involve community. And why also? Because if community, if people, citizens, feel that they are part of the decision, they will take care. If they feel that we are doing something for them, they later on will take care of the space. They will never destroy it. And this is important, but we never take in consideration. Then now I want to give to you a possibility to ask a question. Someone want to ask something? She's ready. She do. Yeah, maybe.
It shows what a good job you all did.
مساء الخير. لاحظت في هذه الأمسية أن هذه العروض المقدمة لحد الآن هي كانت كإجابة على مختلف الإشكالات التي طرحت خلال الأمس وصباح هذا اليوم. فدور المجتمع في فرض حاجياته على السياسيين. أنا لاحظت خلال هذه الأيام نتحدث عن أصحاب القرار وكأن الخبراء ليسوا أصحاب القرار، في حين أن الخبراء والسياسيين والمجتمع كلهم يعيشون في نفس الفضاء، ويجب أن يساهموا جميعهم بهذه الطريقة. فأعتقد أننا جزء من أصحاب القرار، يجب أن نفهم بهذه الطريقة. والدليل هو الحركة المجتمعية اللي يقوم بها الإخوة في بيروت، واللي لحد الآن رغم أن هذا الفضاء لم يفتح ولكنه سيفتح بهذا الإصرار، ويمكن أن تفتح فضاءات أخرى كذلك. إذن المسألة هي مسألة في عمقها سياسي. في بيروت نلاحظ النوع من القهر السياسي وردود الفعل الإيجابية للمجتمع. أنا أعتبرها ردود فعل إيجابية وهي منارات للمستقبل. في تركيا نلاحظ شيء آخر، هناك يعني فضاء ديمقراطي، في المقابل هناك بحث علمي وإشراك للخبراء في إنتاج مستقبل للأجيال. في غانا هناك انطلاقة مهمة، يعني كما قالت المتدخلة أن هناك ديمقراطية حديثة وهناك مجتمع يتوق للمستقبل. ليس هناك نفس القهر السياسي ولكن يحتاج إلى مبادرات من هذا النوع. إذن أعتقد أن هذه الأمسية كانت فيها يعني إشارات منهجية للحلول الممكنة للمستقبل. شكرا.
No, I agree. I think that it's really interesting for me to think about, well, especially when we talk about democracy. You know, are we talking about democracy in the political sense or democracy in the sense of the city, in terms of what people have access to, where they can go, what role that they can play in developing their own city? I agree with that. I think that it's important to think about, just like you were saying, the idea of, you know, we all play a role. There's a series of decision makers, not just the people that sit in government, but also the people that use the spaces, the people that try to affect policy, even maybe other parties who could potentially be involved. So I think that plays also a very fundamental role in making any society more democratic.
And actually, maybe I can add something about historic peninsula. I show you that four phase of the project. The first one is Eminönü and second one is Sirkeci. And actually the Lili part, the third phase of the project was conducted with stakeholders in this area. The commercial stakeholders wanted municipality to implement the pedestrianization project the area. So they actually go to municipality and say that we can fund the project. Let's work together, and with your help and your decisions, we can make this area better, because we want to live in better condition. And we saw from this first two phases that people attracts that pedestrianizated streets and feels more safe, so they go there mostly. So we want to attract people to our sub-regions, so let's work together. So it's an important example, I guess, because it doesn't work only one-sided. not only NGOs, not only municipality, but not only the locals, but if all the stakeholders and all people work together to create some good spaces, some safe public spaces, some attractive public spaces, then it's really ends fine. You can manage something, but it's not a easy process. It doesn't comes like this quick. For example, in Historic Peninsula, it's the pedestrianization project talking about since 80s, I guess. All the professors in universities and urban planning and architecture department, they were telling that the area is also UNESCO heritage and historic and cultural and archaeological sites also. So they were kept saying that the area should be pedestrianized. So it's a really long process that in the end, actually in 2009, maybe like, it sounds like more than 20 years, like 30 years later, the municipality could manage it after really huge efforts. So it's important to also work with stakeholders in the area, so they should want it at the same time, and also the academics and NGOs and the municipality and, of course, local governments. So that's what you're saying is so right.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for these very rich examples, because this is what we were also waiting for during those 2 days where we had a number of abstract, general, political, technological, and other discussions and presentations. And many have asked during the coffee breaks and the lunch breaks, where are the concrete examples, what to do, where to start. And I think what we will need at the end of the day is how to bridge between those little examples, small examples in different points and places and spaces of cities, smaller and larger cities, or in a more coherent approach, but in one area. And I mean, Istanbul is a big city. I mean, what about the rest of that metropolis? So how to bridge the gap between these examples and a coherent strategy, so that every citizen has, in a walkable distance or in a shorter distance, a place which is public and which gives this sustainability, this livability of a city. And that's kind of the squaring the circle at the end of these 2 days conference. Thanks.
Thank you. I would like to make a question to Mohammed and Victoria, because I lived in Addis Ababa before coming here, and I also was looking for public spaces there. There was a park not far from my house, and the park was accessible to everybody. Was like only foreigners had to pay a ticket to get in, so it was available as a public space. But the problem was the people using the park were not respecting it. Girls were being harassed. The park was dirty and it was not pleasant. So while I agree, and I think it's fundamental to give access to public spaces, what are the mechanisms to ensure a good management that, like, do you need an external entity, a company or the state to manage it, or are the mechanisms to ensure that a public space remains like a place, like a nice place to stay, because this is also very important. Pardon? I was in Addis Ababa, but I think it's the case everywhere. Like public spaces, when they are open, they risk, like when they're used, they run the risk to be used in a good way or in a bad way, of course.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, more and more I'm thinking about when it comes to like public spaces, obviously there are different forms of it, right? So I think that when it comes to like the earlier example I showed of Avila Sutherland Park, this large, expansive 12-acre park, there is a role for that. But that one maybe is not the intended role. And I think, you know, these small sort of like more tactical initiatives to create more community-centered space, it's actually quite interesting because it really harkens back to very like traditional West African styles of urban planning, which was really focused on, well, it wasn't urban planning, but you know, it was more focused on these small communities where you would have like a central sort of like town center sort of thing. And they were much smaller spaces. So I think that, and in that, you know, it's all about sort of like the community. You have to have, whether it's a community, and ideally like one person or two people who sort of see themselves as the stewards of those places. So in both of those initiatives that I spoke about, like the first one, Mr. Ajay, who's the patriarch of the household, he automatically commands a lot of respect. So it was really key to work with him as a key stakeholder. When it comes to this larger Chalawote Street Art Festival, we worked with the traditional leader, which is called Gamanche. He is, the ethnic sort of like leader within that space. And then also working with the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, the neighborhood development agency, as well as, this larger area of Jamestown has its own individual communities. So just like we worked with Mr. Ajay in one space, in another space we worked with someone else. Because at the end of the day, you have to have someone who was there before, during, and after, because it's not our initiative, it's this community or this, set of residences initiative, and that is really critical for the sustainability of these places. So one, making sure that this sort of initiative is in line with what they already want and how they want to improve it, and then two, that they're really ready to take ownership. So I think you have to make sure that that's in place even before you start any activity.
Well, I think it's a very important question, but usually the way I think, what you are talking about is a result. So I can say, oh, people are عم بكبوا على الأرض or making things dirty and stop there. But what's more important is to go deeper and ask why. I think to answer your question, we need first to understand why the people are doing this. Sometimes we don't go, this is only my, in Arabic I would say, my worried, أو, can I add this in English too? So, I will speak it in Arabic. Do you have translation? Yeah, it's better for me. So دائما نحن بنوقف عند النتيجة أو الريزلت، يعني ما بنسأل شو اللي سببها. نحن لنحط حلول لأي شيء بحاجة لنفهم سببه. أكيد الناس ما عم بتكب لأنها بس بدها تكب، أكيد في أسباب. معظم الأوقات أحكي هلا ما بعرف بأديس أبابا شو، ولكن معظم الأوقات وتنحكي خصوصا ببيروت، هيدا السلوك جاي من شعور انه الناس ما بيحسوا بالاونرشيب، يعني ما بيحسوا انه هيدي مدينتهم، هيدي ملكهم. مثل ما قلت، اذا ما فيني اشوف البحر وما فيني اوصل للبحر وما عندي اخضر وما عندي رصيف وما عندي شارع، وقتها انا والقرار مني جزء من صنع القرار، معناتها انا ما عم حس انه هيدي مدينتي. ولما أنا أكون كطفل بحاجة لمساحة ألعب، خصوصا أنه أنا بتروماتايزد بليس يعني بسبب الحروب، وما في محل طلع، عادة طفل بيطلع عبر اللعب والشباب بيطلعوا عبر الأنشطة اللي بيمارسوها. لما أنا وقت أنا ما قادر أكون عم مارس نشاط ولا قادر ألعب لظهرهم، وما في أصلاً بروسيس لأني ظهر كل هالمشاكل النفسية اللي عندي إياها، مأمنت لي إياها السياسات العامة. أكيد أنا حيكون عندي تصرف أجريسيف، أكيد أنا ما ححس إنه هيدي مدينتي أو ملكي، وبالتالي حأعمل كتير من السلوكيات الغير مقبولة إذا بدك. فلذلك السؤال هو كيف بنكون جزء من صنع القرار؟ وقت ما نبني جنينة بحي، كيف الناس هن بيكونوا مش بس حدا اركيتكت ببيته عم يعمل الديزاين ويجي يطبقها. السؤال هو كيف هيدا المواطن يكون، حتى الطفل يكون جزء من هذا الشيء. والسؤال الأهم اللي بيطرح حاله هون، ليه أنا وقت بفوت على private place why it's very clean، ليش المساحة كل شيء خاص بكون نظيف، وليش كل شيء عام ما بكون نظيف؟ شو تغير الإنسان اللي عم بفوت هون وما عم بفوت هون؟ أو في إجراءات بيمارسها صاحب السلطة بالمكان الخاص عم بتخلي هالإنسان يتصرف بطريقة معينة حتى لو ما في payment، يعني ما ضروري يكون في payment. أوكي، أما بالمكان العام في سلطة غائبة معظم الأحيان، أو عم بتغيب حالها لتعطي إيمج سيئة عن المكان، عن المساحة العامة. حتى تقول انه نحن مثل ما عم نقول ما بيطلع من عنا شيء والناس وسخه to judge the people more يعني. هيدا بالنسبه. وبس بدي اقول اخر شيء، حتى اي حدا بيكون عنده طفل، يعني بتعرف الطفل، وهيدا ثالث برسبكتيف كمان بدي اقول انه اي حدا عنده طفل بيخلق الطفل بمرحله من العمر السنه وطلوع ببلش يكسر البيت، بصير بده يكتشف يكسر يعمل. فهون ببلش دور التربيه، دور الاديوكيشن، بنبلش نقول يعني. وسامتايمز اهم من هيك انه البيت وقت يكون في طفل كيف ما بنصير نشيل الاشياء اللي ممكن تاذي الطفل ونحطها بمحلات لما تاذيه. وبالتالي بتغير ديكور البيت ليناسب هيدا الشخص. للأسف نحن وقت نخلق أماكن عامة بنخلقها بتشبه بس الاركيتكت وأحلامه، مش بتشبه الناس وأحلام الناس اللي عايشة بالمدينة، وما بنصممها وناخد بعين الاعتبار شو ممكن يصير في أشياء. بس عم ذكرت الطفل لأقول إنه إيه sometimes الممارسات اللي بنعتبرها مخالفة أحيانا طبيعية ومرحلية وضرورية لنقدر ننتقل لمرحلة الرشد ونفهم الحدود ونفهم شو اللي فينا نعمله وشو اللي ما فينا نعمله. إذا ما نرفض نمرق بهيدي المرحلة معناتها نحن ولا بحياتنا مثل واحد بده يحكي بس بخاف يحكي ويغلط فما بيحكي، فبضله بيعرف يحكي طول عمره يعني. وبالتالي لا، هيدي مرحلة نفوت فيها، ولكن الأهم أن يكون في سياسة عامة بتجاوب على حاجات الناس وبتشارك العالم وبتاخد بعين الاعتبار كل المشاكل. فما في جواب واحد يعني، حسب الناس. الموضوع الأساسي هو الإنسان، فهم الإنسان وتصرفاته هو اللي بيخلينا نصمم ونحط يمكن قوانين وسلطة تقدر تحد من هذا الشيء. واخر شيء بس بدي اقوله انه لا، الكورنيش بس على موضوع الكورنيش بما انك ذكرتيه، انه انا لقلي الكورنيش لا اتس بابليك سبيس واتس انكلوسيف ببيروت، كل الناس بتنزل. ولكن المشكله تبع الكورنيش انه ما في غيره ببيروت، فبصير في ضغط عليه. نحن وقت عملنا فوكس جروب بين معنا الناس ليه ما عم تنزل على هالاماكن، مع انه في شويه اماكن عامه مثلا ساحه، ومش كلها فنس اكيد، رمله البيضاء منه فنس بعد بس كله مجرير. ساحه الشهداء منا فنس بس منا اكسسبل. وبالتالي ليش الناس ما بتنزل؟ لانه منا ديزاين لتلبي حاجاتهم، ومنا نظيفه، ومنا امنه. هول الثلاث تحديات الأساسية اللي بتخلي المساحات ومنا آمنة ومنا نظيفة. مش لأنه الناس وسخة، لأنه أصلا ما في مين يراقب. يعني شو هالصدفة ما في مين؟ بالأماكن الخاصة بيكون في مين يراقب ويعطي عقوبات، بينما بالأماكن العامة ما في حدا يراقب، ما في حدا يكنس، فبتتراكم الأشياء. وآخر شيء بس في نموذجين سريعين، سوري حكيت كتير. نشوفوا فرنسا الباركس تبعها كلها فنست، بينما بألمانيا كل شيء مفتوح. وآي ثينك هيدا بدل مش بس على شيء فيزيائي، بينما على عقلية معينة بالتعامل مع الإنسان. وكل مالك بتشوفوا الناس بفرنسا أكتر أجريسيف بتعاملهم مع المكان العام، بينما بتشوفوا بألمانيا الناس أكتر مرتاحة والمساحات العامة محترمة أكتر.
مساء الخير. في البداية أريد أن أحيي الأخ محمد ومن خلاله المجتمع المدني في بيروت وفي لبنان وفي كل البلد العربي على إصرارهم ومتابعتهم من أجل فتح هذا المجال العمومي. إحنا في المغرب عشنا تجربة مماثلة. كانت عندنا في شمال المغرب مسافة كبيرة، وهي من أجمل المحطات الاصطيافية في المغرب، كانت مغلقة تقريبا على العموم. كانت جهات نافذة وجهات خاصة تحتكر هذه الفضاء الكبير من البحر الأبيض المتوسط، وهناك حراس موجودين يمنعون المواطنين من الدخول لهذه المناطق. أعتقد أن المسألة معقدة شيئا ما، وهي مرتبطة ارتباطا أساسيا بديمقراطية المجتمع. نحن بعد التحولات السياسية اللي وقعت في المغرب وبفضل تكتل ومجهود المجتمع المدني والاستجابة والاستعداد الذي بدأ على مستوى السلطة في البلد، استطعنا أن نحرر وأسطر على كلمة محرر هذا الجزء الذي كان ممنوعا على المواطنين، وهو الآن فضاء من أجمل، ربما يستقطب أكبر عدد من السياح الداخليين في المغرب. الآن لو تذهب إلى منطقة الشمال في فصل الصيف لن تجد مكان، لأنه الفضاء أصبح مفتوحا للعموم. إذا دور المجتمع المدني وتأكيده طبعا لا بد من استحضار المسار الديمقراطي والتحولات الديمقراطية التي يجب أن تصاحب هذه الحركة المجتمعية. ولكن هناك مجال آخر، العالم العربي للأسف الموروث المساحة الفضائية هو موروث ما ورثناه في أغلب الأحيان على الفترة الاستعمارية. غالبا في التصميم والليربانيز ديال المغرب ديال البلد العربي الآن قليل جدا أن نستحضر المساحات العامة في تخطيط لمدننا. نحن نعيش في كثير مدننا، على الأقل أتحدث عن المغرب الذي أعرفه، في كثير مدننا المغربية الأطفال يلعبون في الشوارع ويوميا وباستمرار، وهذا شيء مخيف، لأنه هذا هم رجال المستقبل. جميل جدا أن نبني فضاءات رسمية كملاعب كبرى بأحدث التجهيزات، ولكن إذا لم تصاحب ذلك بنيات تحتية على مستوى يعني الأحياء، ما نسميه الآن بتجهيزات القرب، كيف يمكن أن نهيئ رياضيين لهذه المنشآت الكبرى التي نبني؟ وفي المدينة العربية كذلك هناك إشكال كبير مشترك، هو احتلال الملك العام اللي هو فضاء عام، وخاصة فضاء المشاة، من حركة اقتصادية نظرا للوضع الكارثي للبنية الاقتصادية العربية، بحيث جزء كبير من هذا التحرك الاقتصادي هو مجال غير منظم. نجد أنه مواطنين يحتلون الفضاء العمومي من أجل حركة تجارية، كما رأينا في العرض التي قدمت الأخت في غانا، السيدة التي تبيع في الفضاء العام. وأكيد أن المسألة تكون كذلك في الفضاء الذي اشتغل عليه الإخوان في تركيا. سؤالي هو صعب المقاربة، كيف يمكن أن نحرر هذا الفضاء العمومي اللي هو أصلا مخصص لحركة التنقل إلى مع أخذ بعين الاعتبار وضعية هاد الذين يستغلونه للكسب. مسألة معقدة. وسؤال ثاني، التصور حول بناء فضاءات جديدة، لأنه في ظل الكثافة السكانية للمدن وغياب منشآت قديمة من أجل إنشاء منشآت جديدة. ونحن نعلم أنه المشكل الوعاء العقاري مطروح بشكل كبير في المدن العربية، والثمن مرتفع وباهظ جدا. كيف يمكن أن نوفق بين هذه الرغبات الحقيقية للمجتمع وهذه الإكراهات الاقتصادية اللي فئة أخرى من المجتمع؟ شكرا.
I won't take much time. I just want to make a couple of suggestions. I was very touched by what Muhammad said, and I'm very saddened at the same time that we still have this situation of what you described in such a vibrant city like Beirut. And I didn't know this was the case until you told me. So my suggestion is that in the case that you have in Lebanon, where there's a very stagnant government and each one is trenched in their own way of doing business and they're not getting anywhere, there is a way that you can go forward, and I would suggest that there are two. First, it is no longer only a national dilemma. I mean, it's not, don't only depend on yourselves. You have other sources of power that you probably are not using. First, you have your community, which is in the diaspora, and I don't know how you are conversing with them or exchanging information. There should be a reaching out to those people, Lebanese living outside of Lebanon, to have them put some pressure. Also, there's a lot of things that they can do in order to support the locals, you guys here. So try to reach out to them. Number two, I would suggest to try to internationalize this. Shame them, shame the decision maker through international media, through international eyes, whatever that might be, to make them realize that this is not acceptable. This shouldn't happen. And then number three, on the way that you want to organize, and I think you touched upon that very much. We have a similar example in Jordan where we have national parks. In the 90s, they were being burnt. Why? Because they were not being used or appreciated by the local inhabitants that were living in these parks or around them. Until they started integrating the locals from these areas into the management, that park became successful and sustainable. So in your case, when you want to talk about a beach or a park and the management of that beach and the park, you must be able to provide the necessary awareness to those communities who live next to it and have them empowered enough so that they feel that this is their park and they want to sustain it and clean and keep it safe. So I would suggest that in the terms that you are working within here in Lebanon, that you try to reach out to the international people. On one side, there's a huge amount of donor support. This is what I mentioned yesterday. Who gives money in terms of grants or projects to Lebanon? AFD, I'm sure, EIB, EU, USAID. Those have immense non-political, perhaps, pressure that they can put on indirectly. So by saying that we will give you this money, but you have to, open up your parks or your more public use, and they do have, you have to know who to speak with on a personal level and try them to have their personal interaction with the decision makers also. So those three things are very important if you want to change slowly, subtly, to get things moving. Depending on what you're saying, ما في خجل مرات لا نبي لا كرامة للنبي عند قومه. You are very weak in the eyes of the decision makers here. Why should they change? Thank you.
Sorry, but there is a coffee break, and if you want to continue to discuss, you can continue out. If some of you want to answer to the question before to conclude.
I can say fast, I didn't have the time to show, but we have a lot of community awareness. In university, schools, in the streets, in the wall of the streets, in the media. We were in most of the international media, like BBC, like Al Jazeera, like Washington Post, Los Angeles Times. I mean, they wrote a lot about our action, especially for Hirsch Beirut. Of course, I don't have a relation with the Lebanese community outside Lebanon. I tried and I'm trying. If you know a way, please let me know. This is very important to support us. We need this. Shame in the decision makers, I said in media, yeah, we did it, but maybe the donors you are talking about, maybe we don't know who, yeah, that's true. I don't know who is the right person to talk, who might affect them, yeah, find out. Finally, just for our friend from Morocco, right? Okay, I'm going in 5 December there. So what I want to say, is it change? You have, like we all know, like change, there is resistance for any change we want to do. So the best way, which I believe in, and we organize a lot of town hall meetings and debates. So, and it's all in YouTube. We use a lot of social media also. So coming back to the point, it's what's very important is to make the change, and this is all the studies say, is to create dialogue, especially between between citizen, between each other, and also the decision maker. I mean, you can't change without explaining for these people what this change will bring to them. This is first. Second, before explaining what will bring, make sure that the people want this change, that it answers their needs. Why we want to change I mean, the man is, هو الأساس, is what's assess in English? Yeah, he's essential. Yeah. So that's why we have to make sure like the change we are seeking really answers what he needs, and that's why then he will be with you, and then you can organize a lot of dialogue with the community, discussion with the community. The community will change. I can't change alone. The community has to stop. The community has to be with you in order. So how to make the community involved? This is very important. I think dialogue and research and study and understanding is very important for that.
I'll just add something to that, at least from the West African context, which is, you'd spoken about, this idea of why not create new spaces, new public spaces. And I think that at least in the context of Accra, and also from my experience in Nigeria, sometimes it's sort of like a two-pronged approach. It's like one, trying to sort of open up or make more free the public spaces, these parks, et cetera, that do exist, to really sort of change the attitudes of the planning agencies about how these should be used. But I really do think also there's a fundamental need to change our own conceptions about how we see public space. I know in the Ghanaian, in the Nigerian context, it's always very focused on looking at what is happening in the US. Oh, well, they have Central Park in New York City, so we should also have Central Park. Or, oh, in London, they have Hyde Park, so we need something like that. But does that really make sense with how we use our space? You know what I mean? In terms of, especially, I think it's really important to look at, especially like traditionally how we engage with our space. Why is it that we use the streets when it comes? Is it just about because there's no other public space, or does that have to deal with maybe even the proximity of residences toward one another, toward each other, being around your neighbor, those sorts of things? So we also have to think about what we consider to be the public space, what we consider to be these spaces that bring people together, how we look at things culturally. I think that's very important. So adding new spaces, there's potential for that, but I think it's also very crucial to really think about, to reconceptualize or reimagine how we see public space in our own environments, and then plan for that accordingly.
And I will leave to you to finish, to conclude.
Well, there's not much to wrap up, because I couldn't tell you that you have a coffee break waiting for you and then keep you waiting again because I have to say so much. So we will just say thank you on behalf of Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung. I think it was not only rich from the part of the the panelists, but also from the part of the participants. I think the interest was very strong, and there is a good need to follow up. The last conference was 2.5 years ago, but I can promise on behalf of FES that we will follow up very much sooner than that, somewhere in the region, and we will see whether it's the Maghreb next, or again some place in the Mashriq, or in Beirut again. I would like to thank our partners from the Issam Fares Institute again, and could well be that the follow-up will be with them again, if they want to. Thanks, Rana. Thanks, everybody, and good luck.
I would also like to thank you all for coming today and for this very interesting discussion. And I would also like to thank Achim and the Friedrich-Ebert team in Beirut for this very nice partnership. And I hope we will get to do this again soon. Thank you all.